and it looked like the Indiana Fever front office is caught red-handed, lying to reporters.
The Caitlin Clark injury situation is officially a mess because not only is there not more clarity, there's more confusion about what her timeline could be.
It almost feels like Stephanie White just pulled off the worst illusion act in WNBA history. She tried to downplay Caitlin Clark's injury right in front of everyone, as if fans wouldn't catch on. But let's be honest, the internet already pieced together the evidence, and the contradictions are impossible to ignore. Did she really think nobody would notice? At this point, the bigger question is who deserves less trust, the Indiana Fever's front office or the reporters covering the team. Now, here's where things get interesting. The deeper you dig into this situation, the more suspicious it looks. Stephanie White, the head coach of the Fever, seemed to believe she could make a quick TV appearance, toss out a few vague comments about Caitlin's condition, and walk away without anyone questioning her. The problem? Her entire timeline of events simply doesn't add up. And in the sports world, when the timeline doesn't make sense, fans will absolutely call you out. That's the reality. Once the cracks show, there's no hiding them.
It was said on the ESPN broadcast on August 12th that Stephanie White hoped Clark would be back in practice this week. Open portion of practice, Clark is not seen. And Stephanie White afterwards said it's status quo until Clark is back at practice. Well, what changed? Right? I know there's never been a direct timeline, but all the signs seem to point in the direction of Clark returning soon. Even Natasha Howard saying, "See you soon, CC." Now it's like, wait and see.
So, let's roll the tape back on this entire circus, because honestly, it's ridiculous. The official version of events they tried to feed everyone was that Caitlin Clark suffered her injury during a workout session, supposedly on August 7th. Convenient, right? It's the kind of story that sounds too polished, almost as if it was rehearsed in the locker room before being handed off to the media. The problem is, fans aren't gullible. People are watching closely, and we've got the receipts to prove it. On that exact date, August 7th, there's clear video evidence of Caitlin Clark strolling through Phoenix, effortlessly carrying a Prada bag that probably costs more than most people's cars. And here's the kicker, she looked completely fine. No limp, no grimace, no hesitation in her step. She moved with ease, like nothing was wrong. Unless Prada suddenly doubled as a revolutionary medical device for instant healing, the narrative that she was injured on the 7th just doesn't hold water. Let's call it for what it is, total nonsense. A flimsy cover story that collapses the moment you compare it with reality.
And there's further information coming out that Clark suffered a bit of an ankle injury in the midst of her recovery process. Did that hinder her return? One reporter saying yes, another reporter is saying no. Bottom line is, we need to know a little bit more. We don't need Caitlin Clark's in-depth medical report, but it's fair for fans to wonder if the Fever and the league's biggest star is going to return to the floor this season or what the chances are. And she's been out of action for 5 weeks, so it's not as if some patience hasn't been expressed.
But here's where things shift from questionable to downright laughable. Instead of realizing their first excuse was already falling apart, Stephanie White and her PR team decided not to back off. In fact, they doubled down. Rather than walking it back or clarifying the timeline, they leaned into the same shaky story, as if repeating it would somehow make it believable. It's almost comical, but also a little insulting, because it suggests they truly think fans aren't paying attention. And if there's one thing sports fans are good at, it's catching the details that don't add up.
I feel like they were lying about her injury as far as like the severity of it. I think it's a really bad injury. I think when they rushed her back that one time, I think she hurt it even more and it pushed the timeline back.
Trying to come back and come back quickly. She needs to make sure that she's 100%. Her competitor wants to play. We're prioritizing her long-term health and wellness is the most important thing.
As bad as it might sound, I think it might be like a season-ending level type of injury and they're hoping to get in the playoffs and they can somehow get her.
And get this, some reporters, the very people we rely on to deliver facts, couldn't even keep a straight face while covering Caitlin's so-called injury. Take Scott Agnes, for example. Instead of reporting with professionalism, he started laughing as he retold the story. And we're not talking about a small nervous chuckle here. No, he went full comedy mode, almost like he was rehearsing for a stand-up routine while explaining how unlucky Caitlin supposedly was to get injured at the very end of a workout session. Like seriously? You're laughing about the health of the biggest name in women's basketball right now? That's not just poor judgment, it's downright embarrassing. It shows a complete lack of respect for Caitlyn, for the fans, and for the sport itself. When the media starts treating a potential injury to a superstar like it's some kind of punchline, it stops being news and turns into clown behavior. Straight up.
And the craziest thing about this last groin injury with Caitlin Clark is how it's been covered. The day after she had the groin injury, she was listed as day-to-day. And then a couple weeks after that, then she was listed to being out indefinitely. Now, ESPN had August 12th as the circled return date for Caitlin Clark to get back onto the court. And just yesterday, she was listed as a game time decision for today's game against the Dallas Wings. And then after practice yesterday, Coach Stephanie White basically came out and said, like, no, Caitlin Clark hasn't even been practicing. So they changed it from a game time decision to her being out. This has been all over the place, and I get it to a certain extent. The fans, the media does not need to know every little thing that's going on with Caitlin Clark's injuries, especially a star player like that. We will never know all the information, nor should we know all the information, and that's actually good for Caitlin. It protects her for when she does come back on the court. She can't be targeted. Teams can't use a certain injury or ailment against her if people don't really know what is going on. But the reporting of her timeline in general, there has been no rhyme or reason to what has been shared about it.
And honestly, this right here is the exact reason fans have lost every ounce of trust in the Fever's front office and their cozy little circle of media buddies. Look, spinning a story is one thing. We all know sports organizations do it all the time. It's part of the game, and fans usually let it slide. But straight up lying to your own supporters, and then delivering that lie with a smug little smirk, that's on a whole different level. It's not just dishonest, it's downright insulting. What they're really saying with that attitude is, we think you're too clueless to catch on. But here's the reality check. Fans are sharper than they give us credit for. The evidence is out there, the inconsistencies are obvious, and people aren't stupid. So, news flash, we noticed everything. And once fans stop trusting the front office, it's not just a PR problem anymore. It's a loyalty problem that no franchise can afford.
Nonsense is false hope to get people to keep showing up, keep buying tickets. They got us content creators waiting and hoping, hey, they said she might be, this is the empty time. This is the time for practice that she might return. There you see it. Caitlin Clark on the sidelines, not practicing at all. It's done, you guys. It's over. It's over. We just have to accept the fact there will be no more Caitlin Clark this season. It is what it is. It is a wrap.
Now let's break down how these lies keep stacking up, because the deeper you look, the worse it gets. Remember that game where assistant coach Bianca January clearly stepped on Caitlin Clark's foot? That didn't look like some harmless accident. It came off sloppy, careless, and reckless. But somehow, that entire moment has been conveniently buried beneath the fake timeline Stephanie White and her crew are pushing. They want fans to believe Caitlin just twisted her foot during a random practice drill. But here's the catch. The actual game footage paints a completely different picture. So which story is the truth? Did the injury really happen in practice? Or did one of your own coaches cause it during live play? You can't have it both ways, and fans aren't buying the contradiction. What makes it even worse is the role Caitlin herself has been forced to play in this carefully crafted PR machine. Every time she speaks on her recovery, it sounds painfully scripted, like the lines were typed up and handed to her by some Fever intern. I'm working hard, I'm feeling good, just unlucky. It's the exact same canned response they've been recycling for months. But here's the problem. Nobody's fooled anymore. Fans remember the August footage of Caitlin walking around perfectly fine. They remember January's foot stomp. And they remember how disastrously the Fever have mishandled her since the very beginning. When all those puzzle pieces click together, the picture that emerges is anything but flattering. And let's not forget who we're talking about here. This isn't a rookie trying to find her footing. Caitlin Clark is in her second year now. She's already proven herself on the court, already shattered expectations, and she's already selling out arenas across the country. For the Fever to treat her like a disposable piece in a PR cover-up is not only reckless, it's a betrayal of the very player keeping the franchise alive. And yet, here we are, watching Caitlin Clark get treated like she's nothing more than a piece of equipment the front office can tinker with. If this were the NBA and a coach had injured a superstar, heads would have rolled immediately. ESPN would be wall-to-wall with coverage, and the league office would have already launched multiple investigations. But in the WNBA, silence. Nothing but crickets and a handful of reporters acting more like unpaid interns for the team than independent journalists. And speaking of reporters, Scott Agnes, this one's on you. Fans counted on you to be a reliable voice, someone who would cut through the spin and give real updates. Instead, you turned into a full-blown company man, parroting that ridiculous story about a defensive drill injury as if it were gospel truth. And the worst part, you actually looked happy about it, smiling like Caitlin's setback was just the perfect story to milk for clicks. That kind of behavior doesn't just cross the line, it erases it completely. The fallout has been brutal. Fans don't just distrust the media now, they're calling for boycotts, and honestly, you can't blame them. The Indiana Fever's credibility is in tatters, and Stephanie White has become the face of this entire mess. She really thought she could hide behind compliant reporters, spoon-feed them a cute little timeline, and expect the public to move on. But here's the thing, this isn't 1995 anymore. Fans have eyes, they have social media, and they have long memories. Nobody is forgetting what went down in Phoenix. Nobody is forgetting how Brianna January yanked Caitlin away from the fans when she should have been celebrating with them. The receipts are everywhere, and fans are connecting the dots. These aren't just random coincidences, they're clear patterns. And patterns always point to the truth. Right now, it's obvious that the Indiana Fever are completely mishandling Caitlin Clark. But what makes this whole situation even more alarming is that fans are starting to believe the organization may actually want to tone Caitlin down. Think about it. She arrives in the league, instantly shakes everything up, draws record-breaking crowds, and becomes the face of women's basketball almost overnight. But instead of celebrating that momentum, the narrative shifts. Suddenly it's all about how she needs more muscle, how she isn't physically ready, how she has to bulk up, and then what happens? Caitlin packs on muscle way too quickly, ends up injured, and now her entire second season is clouded with uncertainty. That's not just unlucky, that's poor planning at its worst. So where does the blame fall? Squarely on the coaching staff, Stephanie White's staff. At this point, fans are openly saying Caitlin should ditch the Fever's medical team altogether and go back to Iowa doctors for real evaluations. And honestly, can you blame them? If the front office is lying about when she got hurt, what else are they covering up? Are they hiding how severe the injury really is? Are they rushing her back just to save face? These are the legitimate questions fans are asking, and notice how nobody from the Fever has given a single straight answer. Not one. And here's the kicker. When the full truth eventually comes out, Stephanie White and her media allies are going to look like absolute fools. Because once fans connect all the dots, the Phoenix footage, the Prada bag walk, the January foot stomp, the laughing reporters, this carefully constructed narrative completely falls apart. And when it does, the only person White will be able to blame is herself. So buckle up, because this story isn't slowing down, it's only getting more outrageous by the day. Stephanie White really seemed to believe she could step up to the microphone, flash a polished smile, and convince everyone with this neatly packaged workout injury fairy tale. But the problem is, the more she talks, the less sense her story makes. Every explanation she gives only opens up new holes, and instead of patching those holes, she just keeps digging herself deeper into the mess. Stephanie, let's be real. You're not protecting Caitlin, you're not helping the Fever, and you're certainly not saving face. What you're doing is burning your own credibility live in front of the entire basketball world. And if you really want to know how this is sitting with fans, here's the truth. Fever fans are completely done with it. They've been forced to watch Caitlin Clark get shoved around on the court, deliberately targeted by defenders, hacked with no mercy, and brushed off by referees who act like she doesn't even exist. Now add on being mishandled by her own coaching staff, and it's beyond frustrating. It's infuriating. Imagine being the most talked about women's basketball player in decades, the athlete who's single-handedly filling arenas, shattering viewership records, and putting the WNBA on the global map, only to have your reward be a front office that lies about your injury. That's not how you build a superstar. That's how you destroy one. And make no mistake, the The Fever's front office is playing with fire here. Caitlin Clark isn't just another player. She's the spark, the engine, the momentum of the entire league right now. She's the reason casual fans are suddenly tuning into WNBA broadcasts, the reason new audiences are buying tickets, and the reason people who never cared about women's basketball before are suddenly talking about it at dinner tables across the country. If the Fever can't protect her, the damage won't just hit one team. It'll shake the whole league. Take Caitlin Clark out of the picture, and the entire WNBA feels the impact instantly. Attendance dips, TV ratings nosedive. That wave of new sponsorships and revenue that's been flooding in, it slows down to a trickle overnight. That's why when Stephanie White lies about Caitlin's injury, it isn't just sloppy PR. It's essentially an attack on the league's golden goose. You can't build a sports momentum around one superstar and then undermine her with half-truths and cover-ups. It's reckless on every level. Now let's dig into this muscle narrative, because that's another disaster the Fever haven't been called out on nearly enough. From the very moment Caitlin arrived in Indiana, the storyline was the same. She needs to bulk up, she needs to add muscle, she needs to get stronger. And sure, strength training is important. It's a tough, physical league, and players absolutely need to protect themselves. But here's the problem. Bulking up that much, that quickly, is practically asking for trouble. You don't need to be a doctor to understand that's a fast track to injuries. And surprise, surprise, exactly what everyone could have predicted happened. Caitlin's body broke down under the pressure. But instead of admitting their training program may have been too aggressive or even reckless, the Fever decided to push the blame back on Caitlin, calling it just a bad step. Yeah, right. That's like crashing a car because you cut the brakes and then blaming the steering wheel. It doesn't make sense, and fans know it. And here's the part that really stings. The timing couldn't have been worse. Caitlin Clark was catching fire. The Fever were finally showing flashes of what they could become. The league itself was buzzing, riding a high that women's basketball has never experienced before. And just like that, everything got derailed, not by bad luck, but by bad management. Fans were fired up, the energy was electric, and then boom, out of nowhere, this fake injury story drops. Suddenly, Caitlin's sidelined, the Fever stumble, and the entire vibe shifts from hope to confusion. That's not just a streak of bad luck, that feels like sabotage. Whether it was intentional or not, the result is the same: momentum killed. And to make it worse, Stephanie White goes on camera, smiling through her teeth, trying to patch it up with a phony story. Here's where the sarcasm basically writes itself. Stephanie White is walking around like she's some kind of PR mastermind, as if she actually believed fans wouldn't notice the glaring contradictions. Newsflash, this is in 1995. Fans aren't waiting around for tomorrow's newspaper to figure out what happened. We've got Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and about 10,000 smartphones documenting every single second of Caitlin's career. You can't erase footage. You can't rewrite history. Fans literally have slow-motion breakdowns, time-stamped clips, and side-by-side comparisons. You are not fooling anyone. And speaking of not fooling anyone, Scott Agnes, my guy, take a seat. Laughing while delivering news about Caitlin's injury isn't just sloppy, it's flat-out disrespectful. You had one job: give fans facts. Instead, you turned yourself into a hype man for the Fever's PR department. And the absolute worst part? You look like you enjoyed spreading the spin. Like, who taught you that journalism is just repeating whatever the team feeds you, and then tossing in a chuckle for flair? That's not reporting, that's clown work. No wonder fans are openly calling for a boycott. Because once a journalist loses credibility, it's gone for good. And Scott Agnes managed to lose his in about 5 seconds flat. Now let's zoom out, because this isn't just about a single injury or one badly told lie anymore. This is about a pattern, a culture of cover-ups, and a team willing to sacrifice its star for the sake of saving face. This isn't just about one incident. This is about an entire culture of disrespect directed at Caitlin Clark and, by extension, her fan base. From the very moment she entered the league, it's been one obstacle after another. Referees swallowing their whistles while she gets hacked on drives to the basket. Commentators nitpicking every single move she makes instead of celebrating her impact. Coaches trying to rein in her energy instead of letting her change the game. And now, reporters spinning lies about her health to protect the organization. Put it all together, and it starts to feel like there's a coordinated effort to dim her shine. The irony is, it's not working. If anything, every cheap shot, every shady move, every lie only makes her fan base more loyal and more vocal. Fans are riding harder for Caitlyn than ever before, and the louder the disrespect gets, the louder her supporters become. But let's not sugarcoat it. This is dangerous. Caitlyn Clark is not invincible. She's human, and the more the Fever mishandle her, the greater the risk becomes. Every unnecessary injury, every rushed recovery, every dishonest media spin, it all piles up. And if it continues, the nightmare scenario becomes very real. Caitlyn Clark's career could be cut short. If that happens, the backlash against Stephanie White and the Fever won't just be loud, it will be historic. And speaking of history, let's talk about Brianna January for a second, because her name keeps coming up in all of this as well. First, she steps on Caitlyn's foot, sparking one of the biggest controversies of the season. Then she's the one physically pulling Caitlyn back when she's trying to hype up the crowd. And let's be real, what does that look like to you? To fans, it looks like someone who doesn't want Caitlyn to shine too bright, like her energy has to be controlled. And if that's really the case, it's flat out pathetic. This is professional sports. The goal is to win games, to build momentum, to ride the wave of your star player's energy, not to suppress it. Yet here we are, watching Caitlyn's personality and fire get dimmed down by the very people who should be fueling it. That's not leadership, and it's definitely not strategy. That's sabotage disguised as coaching. And here's where Stephanie White's instant regret kicks in. By lying about Caitlyn's injury, she didn't just hide the truth, she created a wildfire. She turned what could have been a routine setback into a full-blown scandal. Now, every move she makes and every word she speaks will be dissected under a microscope. Fans no longer trust her, and national reporters are already circling this story. Once it leaves Indiana's bubble and becomes a mainstream headline, White is absolutely going to wish she had just told the truth from the start. And let's not gloss over what this does to the WNBA's image as a whole. For years, the league has fought tooth and nail for respect, for legitimacy, for real growth. Then Caitlyn Clark arrives and delivers it all in one package. Ratings, ticket sales, sponsorships, and cultural buzz. And what do they do with this once-in-a-generation opportunity? Her own team can't even be honest about a simple injury. That's amateur hour. That's the kind of nonsense that makes casual fans roll their eyes and say, "See, this league isn't serious." And that is so unfair to every other player who's out there grinding every single night, putting their body on the line, trying to push the WNBA forward. The league deserves better. The fans deserve better. And most importantly, Caitlyn Clark deserves better. Instead, what do we get? Stephanie White sitting on camera, delivering her lines like she's auditioning for a bad reality TV show, thinking people won't notice the contradictions. And here's the truth. Caitlyn Clark herself probably knows exactly what's going on. She's way too smart not to. She knows the timeline doesn't add up. She knows the media spin is completely bogus. But she's stuck, right? What's she supposed to do? Call out her own coach in the middle of the season? Risk being labeled as difficult or ungrateful? No, she's trapped in the same PR web as the fans. Forced to smile, forced to nod, forced to play along while her coach tells lies in her name. And that, right there, is the saddest part of all. Caitlyn is being silenced in her own story. Where does this go from here? Two paths. Either the Fever finally come clean, admit they botched this entire situation, and start treating Caitlyn like the franchise player she actually is. Or, what's more likely, they keep lying and the fans keep the receipts. And when the truth finally blows up, it won't just hit hard, it'll hit historic. Stephanie White won't just regret lying, she'll regret underestimating the power of Caitlyn's fan base. And that's where you come in. If you're a fan who's tired of the spin, tired of the lies, tired of watching Caitlyn get dimmed down, don't stay quiet. Use your voice. Flood social media. Demand accountability. Because the more pressure fans apply, the harder it gets for the Fever and the WNBA to ignore. Caitlyn Clark gave this league new life. Now it's time for the league and her team to prove they deserve her.